In order to begin navigating through SharePoint sites, in order to view, create, or store information, you need to first gain access to SharePoint. This is simply a process of opening a browser and entering a URL. But the challenge can be if you don't have any idea what the URL for the SharePoint site is. If the site is a public site, then you might be able to search for it, just like you search for anything else. But if it's a private or an internal site, and you have no idea what the URL is, you just might find yourself stuck in that case. If that is the case, you'll need to ask. It's that simple. If you were given a URL or hyperlink, then life is really easy. Accessing SharePoint is now just a matter of either using the link or entering the URL into the address bar of the browser and pressing enter. You could also use a favorite or a desktop shortcut if you have access to one. Once any of these have been entered and activated, the browser will display the related SharePoint page, assuming, of course, that you have at least read-only permissions to view it. What we're currently seeing on screen is a fairly typical SharePoint page. I want to draw your attention to the URL just so you can kind of use some of the things that we've talked about as far as understanding what it means. This is a private SharePoint site because it starts with HTTPS. It's part of the pckeys.com domain, but specifically, it is a SharePoint site within the pckeys.com domain. It actually is a subsite. So in pckeys.com, you first go into a regular SharePoint team site, and underneath that is a site called the You Got It training site. We are currently at the home page, home.aspx, for the You Got It training site underneath the team site at pckeys.com. I do have to warn you that what you see when you open your SharePoint site will most likely be very different than the one you see here. Why? Because every SharePoint site is different, and even the design and layout can be different. That's okay though, don't panic. What we want to do is get familiar with the common elements of SharePoint so you can identify them, even if they look different on your particular pages. So remember, while you may be in a different place, or maybe even a different color or see different shapes, the elements we're going to talk about now will most likely be somewhere on your pages. If they aren't, it simply means that they've been personalized and removed, or that you just don't have permissions to see them. It's just something that you kind of have to get over because SharePoint is a personalized experience for every company, every organization, and every site that implements it. I've done my best to try to leave this page as much out of the box as I could, not customizing too much, so it does look as standard as possible. But of course, there will be differences with your sites. Your job right now, as you are learning, is to do your best to identify the elements you have on your screen and become familiar with them. All right. Let's take a whirl around SharePoint. Let's kind of start from the top and go down. I guess that's always the best way to go. Remember that this is a browser, so we always have back and forward buttons. If you ever get lost and need to go back, your back button works pretty well. Or if you go back accidentally and want to go back to where you were, then the forward button works as well. We talked a little bit about the URL, so we don't need to talk too much more about that. Let's get down into SharePoint itself. On the top right side of the screen, what you see is something that actually goes by many different names. I like to call it the Name menu, primarily because it has your name on it. When you are logged into SharePoint, you, yourself, are logged into SharePoint. Generally, people don't work in SharePoint as somebody else, so this should always be your name. That way everything is branded and tagged with your information. This is actually a menu. You can click and expand the drop-down and see all different kinds of things that we'll be talking about. About me, you can sign out, and possibly some other options depending on what type of configuration you have. To the right of the My Name menu is a little gear. These are your settings. If you click or tap on this option, it shows you some different options for working with the SharePoint site itself. Again, we'll be going through many of these throughout the course. Shared with, edit the page, add an app, work with the site contents, work with the site settings, and there's even some help to get you started if you need it. I'm hoping that after you watch the videos, you won't need to use that because I will have told you everything already. This, of course, is the ever-popular Help button. Again, hopefully you won't need that too much after you're done watching these videos. Down below are several buttons that, again, you might choose to use as you work with SharePoint. There's a star that works for following information. There's an option that allows you to edit pages, and an option that I actually like, but people don't use very much, and it's really useful for those of you who may be using mobile devices or smaller screens. When you click on this, it actually toggles on and off the left side of the screen. I'll go ahead and click on it a couple of times just so you can see it. What it's doing is turning off something called the quick launch bar, basically making more space for you to see the full content of the main pages. I'll leave it turned on for now since that is the default. There's also the search bar. We'll talk a lot about searching because searching in SharePoint is really critical and very useful. We've talked a lot about the first parts of the SharePoint screen. Let's move to and discuss the left side of the screen in the second part of this topic.